My big question about all this is that sounds great for storing it, but of course the real expense is in serving it. If you have some kind of video platform or something,
Right.
Is that included in the economics of the model, or do you imagine some indexing services that charge on top of that, like APIs to access Ethereum, for example?
Yeah. So, okay, in the base protocol, like anyone can spin up an Arweave node, and there's a data trading system based on the optimistic tit for tat mechanism in BitTorrent. So like if you've joined a BitTorrent swarm, you basically know how Arweave distributes.
If you seed, you get good
Yeah.
good downloading speed if you seed.
Yeah, but most people, and we modify that by like, you also get good distribution of transactions and blocks, which is really useful to miners. So they want to maintain that reputation. But if you are a user, you want to access it in a web browser, right? Like you don't want to have to go run a node in the background and all of this stuff. And so there's a network on top of Arweave. And this is why we call it the Permaweb stack. Like Arweave is at the bottom, and then AO is a compute layer on top. But there's also a distribution layer called Ario. In fact, you're right next to a tweet of this. Okay, so this is Ario network. They basically have a system that incentivizes gateway operators to serve data and content to users. And there's about 250, 300 of these last time I checked. And what's kind of cool about this is they also have a naming system. So in fact, they're talking about it in this tweet. This is very helpful.
That's why we do it, Tim. That's why we do it.
Yeah, nice. All right. So basically the idea is that every gateway registers a domain. And then there's this ArNS naming system that runs underneath it, and they offer subdomains. And so you can buy a subdomain on AO, attach it to data on Arweave, and then you can have your site served from any number of gateways at that subdomain. So if you go to sam.ar.io, you'll see my personal site that I haven't updated for years. But you could also see that site if you went to sam.arweave.net or sam.arweave.dev or .gateway.io or any number of other gateways. And so you get this like portability and real decentralization of access to the web applications without having to install special software, which we think that like crypto consumer users, at least in the early phases, just aren't going to do.
So in short, there's like an AR tokenomic incentive economy on a layer of the stack above just the core storage that's incentivizing these gateways to operate.
Exactly. Yeah, and in the same way that AO itself is also an additional layer in the stack. It's all that's like the internet stack. Everything is kind of modular, and we try to build each piece so that it's the optimum version of what that thing should do, and then layer them on top rather than building some monolith where you make too many opinionated choices in one and then everyone hates the whole thing, rather than being like, okay, well, if someone wanted a different type of CDN, they could build it and plug in on top of the same infrastructure.
Sam, what are some like defining examples you kind of point to really show like end users the power of this technology? I think Paragraph is one that I think I bump into the most often. It's just like, storing blogs and content on Arweave. But yeah, what are some others that kind of really would potentially unlock like the power of this in people's minds?
Yeah. So there's like Web 2.5 stuff. There's the way that we conceptualize it is that there's a sort of inner orbit, if you will, and an outer orbit. In the outer orbit, there's stuff like Paragraph, which is really cool. They're storing the data on Arweave. Same with Mirror, same with Lens. And I think there's also like uploaders of data from Nostra and Farcaster at this point, trying to build an aggregation of all of the social data. But they're really just like writers, and they're using Arweave for its permanent storage capabilities. And that's kind of the depth of it. The thing that our ecosystem, like the diehards, you'll find, in fact, those elephants that liked your tweet the other day.
Plenty of them.
Yeah. What we're all really excited about is the idea of full Permaweb applications, like fully decentralized web applications, where it's not like you go to a domain that realistically is on the centralized web, and there's smart contracts perhaps, and then data stored on Arweave, and you're kind of like gluing it together. It's like you've got a decentralized engine and decentralized wheels, but the chassis is centralized. We're really excited about applications that are like fully Permaweb native, because then they give you this robust guarantee. Basically, once you've built them, they just continue running. The user essentially brings their infrastructure. So the developer doesn't run any, services of their own. They just upload once to the network, and then the user has this relationship with the gateway that makes them animated into something that looks like a full web application.